and how often I think about what I'm thinking about. Because in essence, that's what a reflection practice is. It's about the capacity to not just think your thoughts, but almost sit in the seat behind yourself and go, that's fascinating. Where did that come from? Is that something that's happened before? How might I show up differently? So I think my capacity to do that is changing all the time. And what I'm discovering, and also what I teach, Clint, is that unlearning is funny, and the capacity to reflect is funny, because you sit in your home with your new mental models, with your new structures, with your new behaviors and your new habits, and you go, I'm such a different person from a year ago. I'm doing so well. I'm reading all these books. I've done all these courses. And then you go out into the world and you go, oh, this person. And then you really find out what your defaults are. You won't find your defaults out when you're reading the book and you're not in the presence of your triggers. So I think for me, it's a constant journey. It's a constant journey, but I've definitely built up the practice of being able to, at the end of the week, at the end of the day, or soon after something has happened, to go, wait a minute, do you appreciate how you responded in that situation? Does anything need to be actioned? Do we need to apologize? Is there a reflection that needs to happen? And then next time, how are we going to do this differently? So that's the practice that I'm building that's helping me think about what I'm thinking about.
Hey everyone. We talk a lot about growth, learning new skills, new habits, new ways to perform better. But what if the real growth comes from unlearning, from letting go of the old stuff that no longer serves us? My guest today is someone who's built her life's work around that exact idea. Zanele Njapha, better known as the Unlearning Lady, helps people and organizations rethink what they know, release what's holding them back, and embrace change with courage. In this conversation, we talk about how leaders and individuals can support change, why unlearning can be harder than learning, and what it takes to evolve, both personally and professionally. Please check out Zanele in all the links below. You can get in touch with her. She's an absolute superstar. And if you like the episode, share it. Let's dive in. Zanele, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
My absolute pleasure to have you. Zanele, one of my fundamental questions that I like asking people is very simple, and it's a common question. It's, how are you today?
Oh, I love that question. Goodness, I'm doing well. Busy, as we were talking before we went online. Busy, but so good. I wouldn't be doing anything else. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm also very good. I find this very fulfilling, and it sounds like you do the same. Why is it important to you that you're busy and that you're doing the work, the fantastic work that you're doing? We're going to get into the unlearning part of it shortly, but why is this something that you find so fulfilling?
Oh, goodness, I love that question. I think the reason why I find it so fulfilling is because of how what we get to do, or what I get to do, drives so many other things. So it literally drives the jumps that humanity makes in terms of allowing the next stage of, whether it's organizations, of human transformation, of us becoming a better society, looking after our environment. It all starts with our capacity to unlearn and relearn. So just knowing that the impact that this work makes, for me, makes it so fulfilling. Even on the days that are super packed, I just go, it's okay, it's packed. But at the end of the day, just understanding the outcomes of what we actually do is incredible.
Wonderful. You're known as the Unlearning Lady. I love that, first of all. Really cool concept. What does that mean? What does the Unlearning Lady do?
So the Unlearning Lady is, a friend of mine calls himself a cage rattler, and I call myself a tree shaker. So as the Unlearning Lady, it's my responsibility to shake people's trees, to help individuals to self-disrupt. I mean, we're living in a world that's consistently disrupting us in so many different forms. You could be talking the geopolitical landscape, you're talking economics, you're talking the change in organizations, shifts around technology and AI. But at the end of the day, the only thing we actually have in control, or we can control, is our capacity to disrupt ourselves. And that then becomes a tool that we can use moving forward in a world that's disrupting us from the external. So the unlearning lady is literally the person that comes into an environment and shakes people's trees and helps them to self-disrupt.
I love that, because that's all that we have. The listeners will know that I come from a fitness background, and taking somebody who hasn't exercised for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then they're making the call to then self-disrupt and then say, hey, I need to get somebody to help me with my workouts and I'm going to change my lifestyle. That sounds to me like a version of self-disruption, and starting to learn new behavioral patterns and new habits, and perhaps change their mind on how they approach their life and how they approach what are priorities in their day. So to that point, what have you changed your mind on recently?
I love this question. It's so challenging. My
I
goodness.
ask everybody this, but I normally leave it till the end. But because you're the unlearning lady, I threw it in there right in the beginning.
You're terrible. No, I think it's a brilliant question. So something that I've changed my mind on recently is I recently had a member of my team submit her resignation. And this is fairly recent, probably like a day or 2 days ago. And it challenged me because I had had a perspective around how I grow my team and the individuals that I have within my team and the type of leadership that I wanted to hold. And so when that happened, it challenged me to change my mind about the kind of leadership that I think we should have at the Unlearners. Because when you build something, even though you're the Unlearning Lady and the name of your organization is the Unlearners, it becomes so easy to get trapped in your own thinking and in your own dogmas, in your own mental models. So one thing that I've changed my mind about is that other leaders within the organization can have their own individual leadership styles, and that is still okay. Not everyone needs to lead like me.
Yes. Wow, that is fascinating. And kudos to you for being so self-aware and being able to unpack that, something that's happened so recently as well. You've mentioned, I think I saw it was on your website, in fact, about the importance of monitoring your own thoughts.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, how good are you at monitoring and evaluating your own thoughts? I'm putting you in the hot seat here. We're only like 5 minutes in.
You're killing me today. Wow. I'm currently in the process of tweaking my personal reflection practice and
Mm.
how often I think about what I'm thinking about. Because in essence, that's what a reflection practice is. It's about the capacity to not just think your thoughts, but almost sit in the seat behind yourself and go, that's fascinating. Where did that come from? Is that something that's happened before? How might I show up differently? So I think my capacity to do that is changing all the time. And what I'm discovering, and also what I teach, Clint, is that unlearning is funny, and the capacity to reflect is funny because you sit in your home with your new mental models, with your new structures, with your new behaviors and your new habits, and you go, I'm such a different person from a year ago. I'm doing so well. I'm reading all these books. I've done all these courses. And then you go out into the world and you go, oh, this person. And then you really find out what your defaults are. You won't find your defaults out when you're reading the book and you're not in the presence of your triggers. So I think for me, it's a constant journey. It's a constant journey, but I've definitely built up the practice of being able to, at the end of the week, at the end of the day, or soon after something has happened, to go, wait a minute, do you appreciate how you responded in that situation? Does anything need to be actioned? Do we need to apologize? Is there a reflection that needs to happen? And then next time, how are we going to do this differently? So that's the practice that I'm building that's helping me think about what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds to me like the place in life where you find out where your default settings lie is on that boundary of uncomfortability and discomfort.
Exactly.
So it's very easy to, like you say, get into a new routine or read some books or listen to some podcasts in the car on the way home. And while you're in your comfort zone, that's something that is obviously, it's a step in the right direction, perhaps. But how much of it is actually having practical applications in terms of manifesting change? in a person's life. And it's when you hit that uncomfortable zone that you'll find out, okay, how much have I adopted of the new me, for example. So I think
Exactly.
with this comes an element of a willingness to be able to fail, firstly, because if you are entering into those zones that make you uncomfortable, you have to have a reasonable relationship with failure to find out actually how much of this I'm carrying on. Encouraging people to fail, is that something that is important in this practice of unlearning?
It is. It's a very big one. And I would even say the big work there is to reframe the failure and to reframe what that actually is. And I would even encourage individuals to change the word that they use altogether. And this is the funny thing when you're on an unlearning journey or transformation journey or rewiring journey, it becomes important to understand that words themselves are triggers. Not because the word is in essence a trigger, because you can always shift a word, but because of the meaning that's attached primarily to it. Because of previous experiences, previous associations to the word can then trigger certain feelings. It can trigger then behaviors, but it can also trigger words and speeches or speech or conversation as a result of a word being used. It triggers a certain neural pathways in your brain. So I would recommend that we change it altogether. It becomes a learning, and it's so cheesy now because a lot of people will use that. No, I either win or I learn, but that's in essence what we need to do, even if that's the starting point, until such a point where when a perceived failure happens, you don't see it's not emotionally charged the way it used to be. So it's a very big part of it. And Catherine Schultz, in her book Being Wrong, speaks a lot about the capacity to be wrong, but also to encourage our relationship with being wrong and getting things wrong. Because a big part of why we don't try, why we don't step out of the comfort zone, as you spoke about, is because there is an association that we have with being wrong. And that leads all into things like psychological safety. How safe do we feel to be wrong? And what do we associate with being wrong? And maybe that's a great place for people to start, is to ask themselves, when I think about the concept of failure and being wrong, what do I associate with it? And often what you'll realize is that the underlying or secondary emotion there are things like shame. There is still a relationship with shame that needs to be reworked, that needs to be reframed, that we need to rethink. And then once we come out of that, then we're in a place where we associate it with something different, but then we've also been able to reframe and heal the shame that's associated with it. So step number one is change the word that you use. Yeah.
Okay, fascinating. You spoke there about essentially, I suppose, habits and going back to the same sort of default settings. Why, in your opinion, do you think that people cling to the same habits despite the fact that those habits and those repetitive actions are producing results that are unfavorable to them and to their lives?
Yeah, you would think people would change, right? But it's not actually the case. And research is telling us, I mean, the piece of research that I often quote done by Stanford University is now about decades old. And that research says that 90% of our thoughts are repetitive. But other data across the same spectrum is saying 95% of our thoughts are repetitive. And don't even get me started on how many of them are unconscious compared to conscious thoughts. But this is the reason why, Clint, and this is so important for people to understand, is that the reason why that happens is because our brains are already using 20% of our body's energy. And the brain is literally the code for how you want to live your life. And there's a lot of now insights around how a lot of that is encoded and deeply embedded by the time you're around 30, 35. And so the brain is literally saying to itself, how do I make navigating this planet as easy as is humanly possible? Use as little energy as is possible and preserve. And in an effort to do exactly that, it's creating these defaults. Imagine having to jump into the car and learn how to drive every single time you jumped into the car. My goodness, I had a horrific time learning how to drive in a manual, or what they call a stick shift. I mean, on hills and everything. And so thank goodness for the brain's capacity, or what we now call neuroplasticity, our capacity to build these new frameworks and change our brains. But the other side of it is that because the brain wants simplicity, it wants efficiency, it's going to create these shortcuts. Final thing that I'll say to this is that these shortcuts then, as a result, mean that we can do things easier, but they also mean it's harder to change. They create a sense of safety. I was doing a conference the other day with the team, and they had day one of the conference, and I was coming in for day two. And then I asked everyone in the audience, raise your hand for me if you're sitting in the exact same seat that you sat in yesterday. And you can imagine the hands that went up. Over 50% of the individuals in the room were sitting exactly where they were sitting yesterday. And what is
Wow.
that? It's exactly what you're talking about. It's the brain saying, it feels safe for me to be where I was because there's a predictability. I know what the screen looks like from there. The seat is exactly what I'm used to from yesterday. Not too much in my environment is going to change. I'm not going to be disrupted. So I'm going to go right back to that because there's predictability and there's safety. So it becomes so important for us to give ourselves empathy, but also to give others empathy. The only reason why we do 90% of the same things that we've done, or we think 90% of the same thoughts, is because we associate them with staying alive and with being safe. So it's not too bad. It's not encouraged, but it's also not bad.
Yes, yes. As is most things in life, it's always life. The older I get and the more I hang around,
Yeah.
the more I realize life is gray. I used to think it was black and white. And then
Yes,
the longer you hang around here, the more gray you realize things actually are.
I
Tell me,
agree.
tell me about, okay, so we've established sort of what unlearning is.
Mm.
You go into an organization or you meet and you sit down with a person and they're wanting to disrupt. What is starting point? What is ground zero when we're looking to help somebody unlearn?
So ground zero, when anyone is looking to unlearn or on that unlearning journey, we call it, we've got a framework called NRA. And ground zero in that framework is notice. And you and I have already spoken so beautifully about it. But that's almost the phase where, like we said before, where you think about what you are thinking about. Notice, learn to hear. A coach of mine once used to say, eavesdrop on yourself. Because unless you have gotten to a place where you notice where the 90% is, then you're not going to be encouraged to change it at all. And to make an actual lasting transformation needs justification. It needs you to have the data and to understand the costs. And so unless someone has started to notice, they're not going to jump onto an unlearning journey. So for a lot of people, it's things like, I noticed that it's limiting our capacity to grow as an organization. Our innovation output has gone down. People are leaving the company because they don't have creative output or whatever it is. So notice what the costs are, but also notice the underlying dogmas. This is the way we do things here, or every single morning I have my cereal the exact same way and it's the same cereal. But also this is what it's costing me. So I would say ground zero, and this is usually where we start, is notice. Notice the patterns, notice the underlying dogmas, notice the unwritten rules or unwritten ground rules, as Steph du Plessis calls them. So understanding some of those things. So that's the first step.
Yeah. When you were telling me that, I was thinking of a story, a recent
Mm-hmm.
story with a client of mine. And so he comes and he trains with me and he trains in the early afternoon to give you some
Mm-hmm.
context. And he also enjoys the occasional beer or the not so occasional beer. And and he's self-employed, so he's not bound by normal working hours, etc. And he's done tremendously well over the last year and a bit. He wanted to lose some weight, and part of that was cutting back on his alcohol consumption. And he was the other day, he's in a phase now where he's not drinking Monday through Wednesday, and then he drinks Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Thursday,
Okay.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then Monday through Wednesday, he abstains again. And that's been a nice sort of happy medium for him because he's quite a sociable character. He also needs to fill his cup by being extroverted and hanging out with his buddies and that sort of thing. So I would say that about him, and that's very important to have that balance. But he had a disagreement with his wife, and things were quite emotionally charged, and it was on a Wednesday afternoon. So he comes into training and he wasn't in the best headspace. And he's like, no, I'm just going to have a beer now. I don't care about this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday thing. And then anyway, I let him go. And then I saw him again the following Monday. And I said, so did you have a beer? Did you drink on Wednesday? And he said, no, he stopped and he basically went through like a version of troubleshooting, and he knew what his triggers were. He had the self-awareness to understand what he was going through, but also to then separate himself from the emotions of what was happening. So eavesdropping on himself, as you called it, as your mentor called it. And he was able to navigate himself successfully through the rest of the afternoon. He went to the shops, he kept himself busy, he knocked off some things on his to-do list. And before he knew it, he was out of that emotional danger zone and he was on the other side of it, bang, didn't have any alcohol. And then, of course, he enjoyed his beer on the Thursday. But he told me that story and I was just like looking at him and he's like, what? I was like, dude, you don't realize how fucking good that is. Like, you don't realize I've got people here, like 25 people a day, and they're all trying to change their behavior. And for the most part, they suck at it because that's why they're coming to get me to help them with it. And that takes a long time to figure that out and to also figure out what you're about and have that much self-awareness to be like, oh, I normally do this thing when this thing happens, and that doesn't work out too well for me. I don't really feel great about that afterwards. So I'm going to try and do this, even though this is going to feel hard. And I was like, Brew, you don't understand how flippin' amazing that is. Like, you've done so well. You are winning at life. And he thought about it, and I was like, imagine if you did that every time, like you had a bit of adversity. Like, you would be absolutely crushing it. Like, you'd be untouchable. And then he like saw the big picture, and he was like, oh wow, like I can actually see how much a difference that would make. And it comes all the way back to being able to have that ability to notice. And he's obviously done that work on his own. And then he's got to the next level where he's been able to then troubleshoot and apply something constructive and replace of a destructive unlearning sort of thing. So it was such an amazing story. And I was so stoked for him when he told me that story, because that's what we're all here for, right? We're here to figure out this sort of messy road of life, and there's going to be good days and bad days and quiet days and busy days, and to have those tools and to have people like yourself who are able to try and impart that knowledge and to share with people about how you go about unlearning and doing these things is crucial. It's absolutely crucial.
And just one thing as well to that, Clint, sorry, and it's just when I mentioned notice, one of the things that I didn't mention is the priority there is noticing two key things. And this for me was a game changer. And it's literally just been the area that I live in when I do my reflection practice. When you notice, you are noticing two key things. One, you're noticing the fact. You're noticing the fact and the truth of a situation from the meaning and the assumption and the inference that we attach to it. And this has been incredibly powerful for me, like I mentioned. And what that helps us to do is it helps us to distinguish that the two are not the same thing. So one, if we take that beautiful example that you've just shared, is there was an argument with the spouse. That was the fact. That's what happened. It was there. He was there. He experienced it. It's live. But the two is the meaning that he attaches to it, or the story he starts to tell about it. So that could very easily be, oh, I just can't make this work. There I go again. I can't keep anything going. I need something to help me survive. Whatever it is, he tells a story, and it's the story that then leads to the behavior of picking up the alcoholic beverage or whatever it is in that situation. And so the noticing is where our power truly lies, because we're able to say, this is what happened, but wait a minute, I'm making it mean this. Is that actually what it is? If you have a conversation with the leader, calls you into their office and they say, hey, your performance is not looking too great. I think we need to do some work on it. That's what happened. They had a conversation. Your performance is not looking so great. Two, you could very easily walk out of there and go, I just knew it. He's always hated me. I just can't get anything right. That's all meaning. None of that is a verified fact and truth within the situation. You are interpreting and attaching a meaning that you could very easily challenge. But if you intertwine the two, then what you're telling yourself or what you're telling your brain is that that's a fact, is that your opinion is a fact, when in actual fact, nothing could be further from the truth. So I love that he was able to do that. What he was able to do is really to separate the two and go, I'm not going to make it mean something that it doesn't have to mean. And I guess the second part of it becomes, what's the meaning you do want to attach to it? And then once you can attach a new meaning to what's happening, then the game is truly, truly, truly in your favor.
Yeah, I love that. Often things get complicated when we just jumble them all together, and then it becomes very difficult to separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. But if we can separate, and then we can properly align and orient ourselves to then do something that's going to be in our favor in the future. So yes, I absolutely love that. When you're talking about that and that separation, I come back to how I would apply it in my life. And something that's helped me tremendously with that ability is meditation, actually. And I notice my clients are going to kill me for admitting this, but I will go through phases where I go and I meditate, and I'll do it quite regularly for 3, 4, 5 months. And then I'll go through a patch and my boy is not sleeping too well. So then, it's all hands on deck in the mornings before work or that something along those lines. And then I'll go 1 to 2, 3 months without meditating. And it's something that's so simple. Even a practice of 10 minutes in the morning before I go to work makes a tremendous difference on things like my resilience, my ability to remove emotion from what would normally be an emotionally charged situation or event. How important is it that people take care of their mental wellness and well-being through practices like meditation and perhaps some others, if you've got any suggestions, in their pursuit of unlearning and of personal development?
I like that question. I think there's so many different things that people can do. And as much as we recommend, it becomes so important for us to understand that it's so personal. It's extremely subjective, and what works for you works for you. But at the end of the day, the outcome that we're looking for, and in today's world, the outcome we want in essence is a nervous system regulation. That's what you're looking for. That's what mental wellness campaigns within organizations, our own personal practice, are in essence allowing us to do. It's to take that beautiful autonomic system and to regulate it. So you're looking at anything from your gut to all the way to your respiratory systems, to all of those systems are just needing to be able to cope on a consistent basis. And that's why for everyone it looks different, because it's you and I saying, how do I, in the stresses of life, in the continuous moving and ebbing and flowing of my day-to-day life, where stress is unavoidable, stress is a part of the growth process, it's part of the experience of life, how do I, every now and again, give myself an opportunity to regulate so that I can then come back and show up as the best version of myself? So that's the most important thing. And that's why practices like your meditation become so pivotal, because they help to regulate the nervous system. They help to calm you back down. They help you to center yourself. They help you to, but also the stress levels, the cortisol levels, they help to bring things like that down. So I would strongly recommend whatever works for you. But the one thing that I will say around this, and this is always so fascinating for me, is from person to person, we are so good at making recommendations, but often we look at someone's practice and we go, that's not something to do, or I wouldn't recommend that. Even though the truth of the matter is that if it's working for them and it's a healthy practice, so let me make sure that I say that as well, and it's not destructive, it's working for them, then it's something that they can use. One of the most important things as well that I've found is create a practice that you can rope in or integrate on a consistent basis. So as simple as it can be, whether it's something that's related to any one of your 5 senses, so what you see, surrounding yourself with some kind of beauty. I found that flowers do a lot of that for so many people. So having that in your environment, what does it look like to have something tactile that soothes and regulates you, whether it's surrounding yourself with a fur blanket or something like that, that helps you every now and again as you move through your day to then regulate in that way as well. So it's just thinking about personally for me, what does that look like? And then how do I bring that in on a consistent basis?
Yeah, I like that. I'll add something to that. I heard something the other day. Are you familiar with Peter Attia, Dr. Attia? The
No, I'm not.
longevity, I'm pretty sure it's Peter Attia. Dr. Attia, Attia. So he's like a longevity specialist in America, and he's one of the big influencers with respect to health and general wellness and living a long and healthy life. One of the things that he suggested to people is to begin with the end in mind. So when it comes to your fitness journey and your wellness journey, so to say, okay, what would I like my life to be when I'm 70? What do I want to be able to do when I'm 70? So I'm 35. So let's say if I ask myself that question, I want to be able to play with my grandkids if I've got grandkids at that age. It means that I want to still be active. I'd like to be able to participate in sport. I'd like to be fortunate enough to go overseas and to travel, which means I've got to carry bags and put bags in overhead compartments and that sort of thing. So why that's so important is, number one, you get an idea of, okay, actually, what is going to drive my decision making in terms of what I need to do, as that's what's important to me. Number two, it automatically makes that shift that this is an infinite game. This is not a 6-month weight loss challenge that you hit a target and you hit a number on a scale and then Bob's your uncle and then you can go back to how you were doing things. It's like, okay, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. No matter what, I'm working towards something because this is just never going to end in a good way. And it's such an important thing for people to make, an important mental adjustment to make, is that all of these things that we're sharing today is something that you should learn to apply on a long-term basis. This is not something that is a to-do list over a certain amount of time. And I think where people go wrong, with the best of intentions, is that they go from doing nothing to then trying to do everything. So they're like, okay, I'm not too stoked about how I'm feeling very stressed. I'm not really exercising. So, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go on a diet plan, and then I'm going to get my sleep done, and then I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to listen to podcasts, and I'm going to read a book every month, and I'm going to make sure I drink enough water, and I'm going to da-da-da-da-da-da. And then you set yourself up for failure by trying to do all of that at once. And then by setting yourself up for failure, you then revert to those defaults that you have to then try to unlearn, poor self-esteem, etc., etc. So I would encourage people, just whatever practices you've outlined. So we spoke about the gut. So serotonin is mostly produced in the gut for people who don't know. So that your gut is largely linked to mental well-being. So maybe you might want to start there. Maybe if that's a bridge too far, then maybe you want to start by just getting your sleep a little bit better. So not having screen time before you go to bed, half an hour before you go to bed. Maybe you want to start with the meditation, the 10 minutes in the morning. You don't have to do them all at once. You just have to pick one of the things and then see how much of a difference it makes, and then build off of that rather than try to do everything all at once. Do you think that that is something that's constructive for people to apply?
Definitely, because building out everything, like you say, all at once is a recipe for disaster. We often say, how do you eat an elephant? One chunk at a time. Because with our brains, the minute we see something huge and intimidating, what the brain will do, going right back to the safety conversation we had, is it'll remind you of the last time you set a big, hairy, audacious goal and go, hey, you remember last time that happened? The experience we have in the file cabinet is that you can't do that kind of thing. So are you sure you want to do this? And so all of a sudden, then what happens is your defaults around big goals then kicks in. And that's not how that works. If you think about how we process cell phone numbers, card numbers, ID numbers, we break those numbers up because at a neurological level, we know that huge is intimidating. It needs to be broken up. And you almost want to think about it in this way, Clinton, and you probably have thought of something similar or know of something similar, is there's a concept called a region of rejection and a zone of acceptance. So I'd like to encourage everyone to almost think about a circle around your body that's about maybe a meter in circumference, just around you. And with everything within that circle is what's called your zone of acceptance. That means from where you are standing or where your body is up until the edge of the circle, you are open to those things. So let's say, for example, we're talking about ice cream. And I say, oh, I'm in love with strawberry ice cream. So that means everything from strawberry ice cream up until the edge, I'm open to. I can entertain it because it's not too foreign from what I'm used to. And then someone says to me, okay, Zanele, but how do you feel about banana chocolate nut ice cream? That, something that's so foreign to what I'm used to and what I'm open to, then falls outside of that circle into what's known as a region of rejection. That means I've got a higher chance of rejecting it because of how foreign and uncommon it is to me. If someone was to say to me, okay, fine, that's too much. Maybe how about strawberry ice cream, strawberry and raspberry, a combination of the two? That falls within my zone of acceptance or my zone of acceptance. So within that circle, I'm open to it. It's not too foreign from what I'm used to. So I can start there. And then someone could say, okay, I take away the strawberry, I leave the raspberry, but now we add nuts. Now I'm a little bit more open because they're moving me closer and closer out. And like you said, it's not just boom, out of nowhere, let's go. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Because it gives people a framework through which to troubleshoot in real time. And that is the important thing. Adversity is inevitable. Good days and bad days are inevitable. So what is the framework and the tools that we have at our disposal to be able to actively translate an experience accurately to then take an appropriate action thereafter to avoid making a bad day even worse? For example, you can always make a bad day worse, right? And you can always stop and make it better by having a framework to be able to adjust accordingly. We've spoken a lot about learning on an individual level so far. What about moving into a group environment? So you do a lot of work with businesses, you step into a corporate environment, and now we have, as a collective, there's a collective identity and culture of a company. How does this process of unlearning then unfold in a collective space rather than on an individual level?
That is such a fascinating question because organizations they almost have two different challenges. One, there's the challenge of the legacy and the tradition. And two, there's the challenge of the complexity around that individuals bring. When individuals come together, they add a level of complexity that's unlike anything ever. So one, to start off with the whole legacy tradition conversation that makes organizations so unique from individuals is that, like you say, there is a collective identity that we bring in that has worked so well in the past. They say, why change a winning formula, right? And so that tradition and legacy is, I heard someone once say, tradition is peer pressure from dead people. And I thought that was so a little bit dark, but fascinating. And that's what tradition and legacy can be. It is almost this cloud that walks before we walk into a room that defines today, even though it's yesterday's dogma, it's yesterday's story, it's yesterday's conversation and strategies and policies, but it's actually driving today. So that's the one side. And then the other side, like I mentioned a little bit earlier on, if you're thinking about a team, and this is what I always find fascinating, if you're thinking about a team and you're going, okay, team, it's time for us to challenge the way we've always done things and our business models or our strategy, depending on the client. Yes, there's that, but because each and every person needs to work through their own personal unlearning journey to get us all there, it adds a much deeper conversation. Because if the story I'm telling myself about the way we've always done things is that, no, but my granddad used to work at this company and this is he used to sing the company's motto to us every night. So I think we should keep it because it carries a lot of value. And then someone else comes in, but they're coming in from a different company that did things differently. No, I think, I'm coming from that company across the road and they do things pretty well there. And I've seen it work in real time. I think that's how we move ahead. But then you've got someone from maybe Gen Z or Gen A coming into the organization and they're going, let's blow everything up.
Yes.
And so you're sitting there trying to move the organization forward. But the truth of the matter is, and this is also one of the concepts around change management, is that every single person is going through their own change journey individually. And so that's a further level of complexity around working with organizations. So always so fascinating. It's definitely deeper work, but I still find it quite fun. Is that weird?
No, it must certainly be interesting. I mean, no two jobs must ever be the same. No two clients are ever the same. Similar to personal
Ever.
training, no two people are ever the same. We all bring, and in fact, no person is ever the same as they were yesterday. You know,
That's it.
you've got somebody that will come in and they've had a great weekend. The Bokke have won, and they've played a good round of golf, and they're stoked with life. And then the next day they've had a run in with one of their colleagues or one of their buddies, and then it's a completely different person to 2 days ago or yesterday. And then that changes how the plan to get the most out of the session. That changes depending on how a person might be feeling. And then I'm working with people perhaps on a one-on-one basis or groups of people of
Mhm.
4, for example. So it's still relatively easy. But then when you're talking about a group, a collective identity of a culture, and everybody's different backgrounds, especially in a country like South Africa, where we have to take into account cultural considerations and cultural diversity and how we navigate successfully through society. And then you've got that plus the corporate identity and the corporate culture. It must be something that is no doubt very challenging, but also very fulfilling at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that's why unlearning is a beautiful ideology, but also the frameworks are relevant because to what you're saying, Clint, the frameworks almost double up as a proactive strategy, but also as a reactive strategy. So when we think about the two issues that I mentioned, the unlearning approach is how we apply or how we think about our overall organizational journey, but also the individual who's going through that process of moving ahead with the organization is also using unlearning to navigate and almost think about what they're thinking about so that we don't have to sit with each person. Imagine having to sit with each and every person in an organizational change and transformation or unlearning journey and go, okay, so let's talk about you. And the next person, okay, let's talk about you. I mean, goodness, we'd never get anything done. But the beautiful thing about frameworks is that we can go, here's where we want to go as an organization, but here's the point, keeping the main thing the main thing. We can't take everything with us, especially in a world that's changing so fast. I mean, the world changes before you even finish saying the word change. So what are the important things that we want to keep? And they can always change, but then let's keep that top of mind. And then how do we individually build our capacity to unlearn and relearn in order to get there? Then everyone does their personal work, but the organization still moves forward, if that makes some kind of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. What about when you're meeting people for the first time or when you are chatting to people around a braai or at a coffee shop? What are common misconceptions about the concept of unlearning and perhaps what you do for a living, if there are any?
There are a few.
Hmm.
There are a few. I think the
Enlighten me.
biggest one that I get is forgetting. When I ask people, what does unlearning mean to you? The response I'll often get is forgetting. It's throwing out everything I've ever done. And I think those are probably two of the most common ones. It's always weird for me when family members, and I'm one of those people that loves as far as I can to sort of separate my work from my personal life. But it's always so awkward still for me when family members and friends, they use that term and they call me the unlearning lady in like a family personal setting. And, I've let my hair down,
Hmm.
even though I don't have hair to let down, but I let my hair down and I'm sort of chilling. And they're like, hey, unlearning lady. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that right now. Let me just be at the
Yes, yes.
braai.
Do you like to compartmentalize? So, like, this is my social chill space, and then this is my workspace, and this is my whatever space.
It's something that I'm working on because I know that there's an extreme to that. But also nowadays, a big trend that we're finding with individuals and organizations is people still buy from people. As much as organizations have brands and personas, they're not people. And so my journey right now is how where's my line in terms of what I can share, how much I can integrate my personal life into my work, and then where's the line? Where do I
Yeah.
stop with that?
Especially with social media, like
Exactly.
where is the line? 100%. Because at the end of the day, it's about a personal brand.
Mm,
People want to know about you. You know, they want, there's needs to be an element of relatability. And if there's
mm,
relatability, then there's a degree of trust. And if there's a degree of trust, then that's good for business.
yeah.
But where do you draw that line to also preserve your own mental well-being and to be able to take a step back, so that when you do step back into the Unlearning Lady persona or part of your persona and character, you can do
Mm-hmm.
so wholeheartedly because you've been able to take a break from that, for
Yeah.
Saturday and Sunday, or for a week, or for whatever. So I think it's more and more tricky now than it's ever been before with the advent of social media.
Yeah.
Yeah, kudos to you for working on that. It's the same with me when
Yeah.
people and they ask about fitness stuff and what should I eat and what shouldn't I eat and how should I train and how shouldn't I train. And
Mm-hmm.
I entertain it because it's, you want to be helpful, and it sounds like you and I are very service driven. So we want to be in a position to serve and to help
Yeah.
people. And we found that fulfilling, which I do. But at the same time, then you also have to recognize your own personal needs. Like, okay, now I actually need to take a step back. And then you have to
Yeah.
try and maybe deflect and, oh, look what's over there.
Look over there.
Yes, yes. So no, I fully understand where you're coming from with respect to that. But what about, since we're on the topic of personal day-to-day stuff, are there any hard beliefs that you've had to overcome or unlearn in the process of your professional career, as your professional career has unfolded? What, is there anything that comes to mind that you've had to work hard to unlearn?
Yes, there is a big one, and it's one of those consistent ones for me that I'm still working to reframe, and working with people who are sort of helping me with it, and bringing in my reflection practice too. But it's around my imposter syndrome. So that's been a fairly fascinating ride. So I came from, like we mentioned earlier on, I came from a teaching background. So I did that for a few years. And then coming into the corporate space, there was a lot for me around and going back to the NRA framework, the noticing is the story I was telling myself about the fact that I was a teacher before and what that meant to me. And so it became one of those things that I used to hide a lot. I wouldn't even mention it. Like, I'm here now, I'm working with this board of this multinational company, and we're just going to get things moving. But there wouldn't be a place where I would bring it into the conversation, or I would integrate it openly and even put it on a profile or anything. And that was the beginning. Noticing that was the beginning of the journey for me. So then the imposter syndrome was almost coupled to that. And the experience that I would have was, for example, if I would jump off, and I'd never forget the very first time I got an opportunity to work with this phenomenal biotech organization in Boston. I had that conversation, and then as soon as the presentation was over, I got a question. Right at the end of the conversation, the keynote had gone really well, great team, phenomenal organization. And I got a question that I hadn't been prepared for. And I approached the question in a way that I wasn't necessarily proud of. And then afterwards, I felt sick. I had to, at the time, call my boyfriend, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to go back to teaching. This is terrible. So I had an entire fit. And then that experience, or the reflection from that experience, taught me that and we call them the imposter syndrome types. My imposter syndrome type is the perfectionist, but the expert as well. So there's 5 different types of imposter syndrome. They're almost like flavors of
Oh,
imposter
really?
syndrome,
I
or
didn't know
how
that.
you self-sabotage in a situation. So I'll tell you a little bit more about how people can interpret them. So then when I looked back at the experience, I went, okay, Zanele, why did you have that experience? And I went, no, it just, at which point did you find yourself getting triggered by that experience? And I went, it was when that person asked me that question, and I didn't do the question justice, so to speak. And then I went, okay, so what did that make you feel in that moment when you couldn't respond to the question to give it justice or to do the question justice? And I went, it made me feel like I didn't know what I was talking about and I should have known better. And, come on, this is how I'm supposed to be. And I went, okay, there are those two different types, the way that I self-sabotage within any given situation. Because if I don't show up as perfect or as the expert, it triggers my imposter syndrome. And so going right back to where this discussion started, I had to go, what are my triggers? And understanding my type of imposter syndrome meant that I get triggered by situations like this or by being asked a question that I'm not prepared for. And so I had to go right back to the journey and go, okay, and almost reframe it. So what does a response look like that allows you not to be perfect? Because at the end of the day, you're never going to be perfect, ever. It's virtually impossible on the face of this planet. Maybe on the next planet we all go to, it's going to be possible, but not on this one. So what does it look like for you? And I went, it's an openness to not be perfect. Great question. I've never actually received a question like that. Here's how I can answer it, but here's someone else who I know would be able to answer it differently. Boom, done. It's
Yeah, I love
almost not
that.
saying, I have to challenge myself. Next time I have to read all the books because I'm not going to read all the books. The one thing that I can do is I can prepare myself so that when I get there, that trigger doesn't stimulate me the way that it did before. And so that's a big one for me that I'm working through, but I've done a lot of work on it. So I can definitely show up better in those situations.
Wow, well, thank you for your transparency. And I think when people listen to this, there's going to be a lot of people that resonate with that because imposter syndrome it's running wild. And I think you might go as far as saying that imposter syndrome is a compatriot of people who are ambitious, because when you're ambitious and when you're driven and high achievers, you are constantly pushing that boundary. And with that boundary comes, wow, things are moving well and they're also moving really quickly. Do I have the skills?
Mm-hmm.
But ironically, it's the fact that you're questioning whether or not you have the skills that makes you more likely to have the skills.
Ironic.
Yeah. So I had a forensic pathologist on the show once, and Dr. Ryan Blumenthal, and he was talking about in his book young forensic pathologists and experienced forensic pathologists, and the youngsters came in and they were like, "Oh, this is definitely the cause of death, cut and dried, boom, boom, boom," and then the people with more experience would be more inclined to say, no, I don't know, because I think then you could go even further and say, well, wisdom is knowing what you don't know, and then being okay with that. And he said that was always something that stood out to him as the most experienced forensic pathologists were the ones that were prepared to be like, not sure, and I'm okay with not being sure. It's not a reflection on me and my level of competence. Nobody knows everything. So
This is what it is.
it is what it is. And those are the people that ultimately can persevere through those different levels, and not allow the imposter syndrome to halt their progress, but to just become, I suppose, relentless in spite of that.
Yeah.
That allows them to go on and be high achievers in whatever their fields might be. So I think that it's very relatable for a lot of people.
And one thing,
Carry on.
sorry, Clint, one thing to add there before we go ahead is when you think about imposter syndrome and you actually analyze it, there is a lot there that's based on shoulds. And the reason why it's called imposter syndrome is because you feel like you're an imposter. And so you want to relegate your power. Oh, my team did this. Oh, we did this together. I know that you say I did a great job, but there's more than just me. And the important thing that was a huge reframe for me is to understand that the moment you analyze your imposter syndrome by asking yourself, who do I feel I should be in this situation? That's when you're going to be able to know exactly where the trouble or the challenge is. The reason why you're having it or you're experiencing it primarily is because you've got this idea of how you should show up, what you should say, how you should look, and how you should sound, and all of these things that need to be challenged. And when you shift all the way into authenticity, then there isn't, like you were saying so beautifully, there isn't a need to try. Because if I'm not that, then I'm not that. And if I don't know the answer, then I don't know it. It's standing powerfully. And I mean, our world still is moving towards accepting this, but it's standing powerfully in truth, to use a probably little bit more millennial term, my truth. Owning that as far as is humanly possible. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
thought I'd just add.
No, wonderful, wonderful. So I'll close with this, Zanele. I recently had a blast from the past. I watched Aladdin, the 90s Disney classic, on Sunday. We had it on in the background because my boy's got the Disney books and he reads. At the moment, he's going and he goes through the Aladdin book. And I'm trying my best to preserve that 90s Disney culture, and because I think those are just like the best movies of all time, you know, Lion King, Aladdin, Jungle Book. You just can't go wrong with the old school there. But it's amazing how when you watch a movie back as an adult, and we've all watched Aladdin, I'd imagine most people hundreds of times, people similar to my age and yours. And it's amazing how you start to perceive things differently if you watch a kid's movie as an adult versus when you were a child, right? I don't know if you've noticed that, if you've ever done that. There's a scene where the genie comes out of the lamp and Robin Williams does this thing and he's just absolutely fantastic. And I started to think about the concept of these three wishes, right? And the meaning and the symbolism behind that. And here you are, so Genie's saying to Aladdin, I can grant you three wishes. And it really, so you can take it even one step further and say one wish. That really cuts to, okay, it really cuts to the core, like immediately. There's no fluff. It's just boom. What do you want? And you can have it, which is the amazing thing about the genie and the magic lamp. And I've been asking people this question the whole week, and it's been very interesting to hear what people have to say. So I'm going to ask you the same thing. If Genie pops out of the magic lamp and he grants you one wish, Zanele, what would you wish for? And you can't wish for three more wishes. Don't be that person.
There's always that person.
Yeah.
I would say peace of mind. I just want peace. Yeah, that's my big thing. And I mean, every time I light 2 candles in my apartment every single morning, and every time I light the first one, the word I say is peace, and the second word I say is love. Because regardless of what happens, it's just those 2 key things all the time. So I would say if I could have peace, just constant, relentless, unconditional peace, that's it for me. Yeah.
Why do you think that's something that's so important to you?
Because I think there's so many, back to our conversation, there's so many different things that happen that can knock us off kilter, knock us off center. And I don't like that. I don't like the power we give to things to influence how the inside looks and is experienced. So I would say for me, that's the most important thing. It's something I try to do, I endeavor to do. But if I could have it granted, just that I just have it, regardless of what anyone says, what the external looks like, what my top line and bottom line looks like, if I could just have peace, then screw the rest of it.
What a wonderful way to finish. That was a beautiful answer to a really left field question. So well done to you. If people want to find you, if they want to get in touch, Zanele, where can they find you?
So the best place to find me personally is on Instagram. I like to say I live on Instagram, so they can go over to @Zanele_Njapha. So that's my name and my surname, or they can just search the Unlearning Lady. However, if they want to find the Unlearners and explore some of the great work that we do, then they can go over to theunlearners.com, but also the Unlearners is all over social media too.
Wonderful. Zanele, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. It's been an enriching conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been lovely. I appreciate it.
Hey everyone. A huge amount of work and effort goes into producing this podcast, whether it's from the research going into the episode, whether it's finding the guests coming to the location, or them being online, to producing the content, edited and putting it in a format that is conducive to your ears and your eyes. And it goes a really, really long way if you can just do me one thing in return for this free content: share it. Share it far and wide, and if you find an episode useful, send it to someone who might feel the same way. That's all. Thanks a million. See you next week.